single car being washed there. I think that was in the plan all along, was to we'll just get it this B2, and then we'll violate it and never pay our tickets for having all those trucks there, which they did. Still have it, to my knowledge. And then we'll move to the next property. And then whatever is going to go there, a big grocery store, tear down the gas station and make that a big, huge shopping center. That's not what these neighborhoods need. Dolphin Way does not need that. Oakley doesn't need that. It's just a crying shame if you let this continue to creep and ruin our neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, before you sit down, any questions of the board? All right, thank you. All right, next, please. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Boswell. I reside at 1609 Government Street. I'm speaking on behalf of the Government Street Collaborative, which is a combination of Midtown and downtown neighborhoods organizations. We've met 2 or 3 times with the applicant. We had 2 sessions that preceded the last meeting that we had with you gentlemen here on both the variance issue and on the planning commission issue for the PUD. We made some progress in the first meeting. The second meeting, we didn't make a lot of progress. It was agreed that we were going to meet a 3rd time to talk about what other of the exclusions that we were trying to get for the PUD, and this is on the planning side, to see if we could narrow those down and get more specific information about what exactly the applicant wanted to put on that property. To our surprise, the applicant put in their exclusions to the planning staff without telling us that they were going to do that at that point before we were going to meet with them again. So as I'm sitting in the back of the room here, it is very hard to hear, but I think I understood them to say that we did not include them in a public meeting. The definition of a public meeting for what we had is public. Everyone and anyone was invited. It was advertised on Nextdoor and on social media. And that's where the 70 some odd people came to meet to discuss this issue. Out of the 70 people that were there, everyone in that room raised their hand in opposition to both this variance that you're considering today and the PUD that will be considered next week. We have tried our dead level best to work with the applicant to try to get information from them about what it is that they actually want to put there. We're now hearing all kinds of different information. Today, your question about the number of trucks, we were told, well, maybe 2, maybe 3. Now it's up to 5. So what is it going to be once this variance is approved? And as I came down here from my neighborhood, passing right by Griffith Shell, there are 2 budget rental trucks there today, parked on that lot. And there have been trucks there almost constantly every day. And for what I understand is still a violation. So if they're willing to do that at this point without your variance, what are they going to do with the variance? They're going to stretch it, and the word today, as the former speaker said, is creeping. They will creep until they get all of the trucks they can on that lot, and then when they get the PUD over to a B2, they'll claim that they have the right, and I believe Mr. Griffith just said that he believes he has the right to put it on that lot. So the thing that is so frustrating for us is that we hear one thing from them and then they go a little bit further. And we just never can get from them the information that we want, which is what is it that you're going to do with the property ultimately? What is it that we're going to have to put up with as neighbors in this historic neighborhood? There's no way for us to monitor whether or not those two trucks that are there today are there for repair, or are they being picked up from, by a customer who's leasing it? And how are we going to monitor the 5 trucks that they bring in? When were they brought on? When are they leaving? Are they there for repair? What is it? There's no way for us to do it. The city is not going to do it. And we certainly cannot trust at this point the Griffiths to do that. So today I'm asking you to deny this variance because of the wish-washy attitude that they have for the neighborhood, trying to blame the neighborhood, quite frankly, for their failing business. That's what they said in the last meeting we had with them. It was our fault because we are not supporting them. Well, they're not supporting us. So we want this denied. Thank you.
Any questions of the board for this?
I have one. Mr. Boswell?
President.
So I guess one of the surprises I had in reading the dialogue in the opposition was, Griffith Service Station's been there a long time, and I mean, there have been plays about it, and, just kind of an institution within the community, and I guess surprised to see a lot of the neighborhood, backlash against. So from that standpoint, in your mind, or I guess with your involvement with the historic groups, what would y'all rather see there? There are service stations all within historic areas and things, and so I guess, one of the ways I looked at it was, if you got a car wash that's not being used, and just as an aside, I have had my car washed there a number of times over the years, but that being said, I was thinking, well, that would be better to have that property cleaned up and something developed there that would be, what is y'all's thought process on what would be a satisfactory use or compromise there that would make?
Well, when we first began discussions with the Griffiths and amongst ourselves, trying to narrow down what it is that we would like to see there, what the neighborhood would like to see there. A restaurant, a sit-down restaurant. We don't want a drive-through restaurant that's going to litter like we see in so many other spots, and we have fault in many other cases and all along Government Street for the last several years. But there are several uses that we had given for them to use, but unfortunately, they had 12 more of the exclusions that brought in types of businesses that we just felt we could not go with. What I would have loved to have happened is for them to have come to us from the very beginning and talked to us about, what we would like to see as a neighborhood, because quite frankly, whatever they put there, in most cases, is going to depend on the neighborhood to support, just like the gas station itself. And yes, it is an institution that for years, this neighborhood and many parts of Mobile have supported their business. And we would love for them to continue having a successful business there. The question is not that the gas station go. The gas station's provided a service for the neighborhood for a long, long time, and we'd like to see that continuing. But we just do not want them to put something there like a rental business for the trucks. I mean, these trucks are huge.
Mr. Boswell,
Yeah.
I've got to move on with.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, you answered. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Do we have additional speakers on this application in opposition? Good afternoon. Your name and address, please. And pull the mic down.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear her in the back? Okay.
Okay, my name is Barbara Cadell. I reside at 1321 Dolphin Street, about 3 blocks from the Griffith Shell. I attend church at All Saints Episcopal Church, which is directly across the street from the Griffiths. I'm here today to to join my neighbors and reluctantly, because I'm reluctantly opposing this use variance. Mr. Griffith, as everybody has stated, Griffith Shell is an institution in our neighborhood. There's no question that Mr. Griffith doesn't work hard at making his station a success. However, we have several very frustrating situations. Number one, he's been running an illegal operation out of that gas station for many years. That we have complained to the city and he's been cited, but as far as I can tell, he's never paid a fine. So why do we want to reward bad behavior? The other thing is that in his application, he does not display the level of need for this use variance. It's my understanding that when you get a use variance, there has to be a substantial hardship on the property that you're asking the variance for. And I don't see him explaining very adequately why the conditions are such that he has got to have this or he's going to fold. The other thing is the amount of traffic that will produce. If you look at that property up there on the screen, it's a little bitty narrow strip, and he's going to have those big trucks coming and going, in addition to people going to get their cars serviced, in addition to people pulling through with the gas station. That's a lot of cars and trucks in a relatively small area. One more concern that I have is that your staff, the professionals that you hire to advise you, have recommended that you deny the variance request. Once a variance is given, it goes with the property. So today we have people that we know that own that property. Tomorrow, who knows? And whoever gets that gets the use variance. Again, that's the creep factor that my neighbors have talked about. What you would do is going to essentially change the character of the neighborhood that we all love. And like my friend Ms. Hewitt, I have lived there since 1981, and we have seen the neighborhood truly revitalized. Please don't send it the other way. Please deny this variance.
Okay, any questions from the board? Thank you. All right, how many have we had? 3 so far? We could have a 4th. Is there anyone that has anything to add? Once again, we have an opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Flowers. I live at 922 Conti. Also, my husband is rector of All Saints Episcopal Church right across the street from Griffith Shell. And we do support Griffith Shell. The problem, and I've had a problem with my property at 922 Conti, when things get approved and things go wrong, I call 311, and it's years or months before something happens. And it is going to creep, because if that gets approved and then they get the B1 lot to B2, somebody could come in and buy that property and put a huge, huge gas station with multiple pumps. And it just doesn't need to go back to that. It's a part of the government, to me, that should be something low impact that people would want to walk to, shop from, things like that, so that it's a walkable, livable city. And that belongs out past 65 to me, in an industrial area with big trucks. And I also want to speak to the wrecks. I tried to get the traffic. I never heard back. Of all the wrecks I know personally because of All Saints. We've had our big tree, there's a big stone barrier around that tree. We have had to replace it 3 or 4 times. My husband has been hit there with somebody pulling out of government. He couldn't see him. He was in the turn lane to turn south on Ann. It's a terrible location. There are tons of wrecks there. So.
Okay. Any questions? All right. I think it's time for the applicant for a rebuttal.
again, there's some misinformation out there. There was a car wash operating for maybe 15 years. Unfortunately, the cost of replacement is more than I can handle at this time.
Speak up and get closer to the mic.
Yes, sir. Several years ago, Sandy Stimson called me, and Ricardo Woods was on the line with him. Both total gentlemen. They asked me about the trucks, and I had at that time already started to lease property from John Dukes on St. Emmanuel and Broad Street. And when I told them that we had moved the trucks there, they were both very pleased, and that's the last I heard of it for close to 3 years. Now, 6 months ago, I got a citation, and in the citation it says unless you're applying for a use variance. Well, I wanted to do the right thing, so I've applied for a use variance. And we lease property, as you know, somewhere else, and it's our intent not to park any vehicles east of the property shown. We did not know about a meeting with the Oakley Garden District. I'm sorry if I didn't check out somebody's Facebook page. I didn't know about it. And it's unfortunate that we weren't able to share the correct information with the folks. This variance that we're requesting, we're certainly negotiable on the number of trucks. If it's possible, we're certainly open to a use variance just while I'm the owner. And if I should ever sell the business, that use variance goes away. I don't know if that's possible, but we're okay with that. I just hate for the truth to get in the way of a good story. And a lot of information was incorrect, like the variance issue. They gave us 57 things they did not want on that property. We agreed to 48 of them. To my knowledge, I was never told what we want there. They just want to tell me what I can't put there. And 47 out of 50, however many I just said, that's quite a compromise. And we've submitted it to the city for the variance, but this is not a variance. This is not a zoning issue. I beg your pardon. And I'm emotional and flustered, and thank you for your time.
Okay. Any questions once again for the applicant? All right. Staff, is there anything that you have to add that we haven't already heard or kind of the history? Sorry to put you on the spot, but this is obviously very important.
Could you be a little more specific?
Okay, well, first of all, the clarification as to which lot
Okay.
to start with.
The site plan that's in your books and is up on the screen is what is submitted. However, their legal description for the variance, it was pointed out to us, is actually only for this portion in question. That is the reason for the holdover from February until today, so that we could properly notice and advertise that for the use variance only, this is the only property where the trucks are to be located and to traverse.
Okay, second point, whether they have the authority by right to service and have trucks there for repair while they may not be leasing.
Yes.
Pull your mic closer.
Okay.
They're having trouble hearing us.
I understand. There's been several variances associated with the property going back to the 50s, from the corner at Ann Street, continuing eastwardly. But specifically as a B2 use, or B2 property, which this one lot is in the existing B2 district, it allows automotive maintenance. That's like oil changes, tire rotations, things of that nature. Truck, large truck repair automotive repair, even automotive like engine repair, things of that nature, that requires B3, as does the sale of those types of vehicles and the leasing thereof.
Okay. Any other questions of the board for staff?
I have one, Margaret. As far
Mr.
as
Miller?
the concern about policing, I mean, I guess if this was granted and then there was a violation, it's just going to be somebody calling in and reporting it, correct?
That is
So
correct.
it's really incumbent upon the owner to manage that process.
And it's two part. One, calling it in, and two, there being, regardless of whether it's this site or somewhere else, the violation being in place when the inspection's made.
All right. Any other questions, Mr. Davis?
No question. I had the motion.
Okay. All right. Once again, any more discussion of the board, questions? Okay, I would say that this concludes the public hearing on this application. The staff has recommended for denial. And with that, Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a motion that we would approve this application.
Okay, Mr. Davis, before we proceed with a second, call for a second, any conditions regarding number of trucks, hours, anything of that nature?
I'm open to amendments to this motion, but I would like to just, as it is proposed now.
Okay.
I think that we've done a lot of bargaining here. We were over to the other property over there. We were talking about so many vehicles. Now we're talking about 4, maybe 5, in a very restricted area. And so my motion is a very open motion.
Okay. All right, I have a motion to approve.
Can I make a comment just real
Yes,
quick?
Mr. Milling.
Just, I would not be able to support that, just in the sense that I do think because it's a small piece of property, you would need to, if you're gonna, if for me to support it, it'd have to be limited. I would amend to limit it to 3.
I have a motion to approve. Mr. Milling's recommending a modification to the motion to limit to 3. Is there any limit on the hours, like trucks can only be there for 2-3 hours, or is it just strictly for the time period? Okay.
I have a question. So
Yes, Mr. Golden.
are we talking about 3 renting, or can we say 3 total amongst repair, maintenance? I guess repair is not allowed, but maintenance or leasing. So 3 total.
You guys speak to the mic.
I'm sorry. I think a total is my
And the other,
total. Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, I'm just speaking for myself, but for me to support it, I mean, if you start, if you could have 10 trucks there and, 6 of them are for, repair or, re-oil, then I just think that you get to a point where you've totally defeated, I'm trying to find a balance between, their business and, that business has been there a long time. They're trying to run that business and trying to find a balance with that and what the neighborhood wants with the protections. And it's a tricky thing in a historic neighborhood. I mean, it seems like when you have those businesses, but I think if you don't put limits on it, you could end up with a situation that is completely contrary to the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Chairman,
next,
All right.
one more screen,
Yeah.
any kind of screening. I mean, is there ability? I'm trying to envision that site that I see every day, but is there I think I could be supportive with screening. So I would propose screening in a, personally, I would see a, green, something, a planting, a hedgerow that would grow and along the, I know it's tricky because you got a parking lot there, but if it was along the north-south line to limit the visibility of those trucks.
Okay, just to make sure I'm clear, you want screening and you're asking for a hedgerow where?
In front of those, at the front of the parking, no, more to the, on the east side, along in there. If it came down that line to something so that you limited the visibility as you drove.
The only problem I see with that is you're paved there. And if this site, with the trucks being limited to this site, when you take up paving, you're taking up maneuvering. You know, and you have, while Mr. Griffith and his staff, I'm sure, can park these things on a dime, you're renting these to people that, you know, are not going to have good skills.
Do we have more
I
of a
see
site-
the hedgerow being mowed over.
Right. I'm wanting to say there's a line there, that's, and maybe the owner can speak to it, that would give you something to work from. And I mean, Jerry, did you draw this? Can he speak if we're outside the public hearing? No.
Ms. Griffith, you're welcome to come and respond.
There's
Yeah.
a curb that goes across there. There is no dirt or a hedge along there. There is a fence to the left of the property. Yes, and there's a fence to the back of the property. But there is nothing on the east side other than curb and asphalt.
I'm trying to not put a tall wood fence there, but I am trying to screen the vehicles. So that was my goal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Golden, are you clear as to? All right.
I don't think we can screen it, is what I'm hearing.
Do you gentlemen have anything to add before? All right, Mr. Davis, if you'll modify your motion to include any request of your fellow board members here.
So modified as stated by the,
So that would limit to three at
Three
any one time,
at one
either
time.
repair or for lease.
correct.
Okay, and any potential screening, if that's even feasible on the site, not to obstruct any visibility for drivers. I think exiting or entering the property. Okay.
I,
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr.
All right.
Chairman, I accept.
You want a 6-foot fence?
Appreciate.
I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, can we say fence or comparable shrubbery, or I mean, without looking at it, but I believe, you know, anyway.
Okay. Here,
Let's make
here's
sure we got our motion clear. Go ahead.
exactly. You can stipulate, but I would be specific. Either a 6-foot wooden privacy fence, 6-foot wooden privacy fence, or an evergreen vegetative hedge, 6 feet at time of planting and of sufficient density to screen.
Can we say or?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought I used that
Yeah.
conjunction.
You
I
did. just wanted to
apologize.
clarify. So we,
Okay.
an or.
All right. So we have a motion to approve with limit of 3 vehicles, the trucks.
if I could make a comment, and this is not for or against this application, I'm just thinking about an enforcement issue in limiting trucks of any kind. If he has 2 rental trucks there ready to be picked up in 30 minutes, and then 2 people come in vans or some kind of small truck to get an oil change or tire change, it's an automatic violation. So y'all just think about how that can be addressed or enforced in the future. We might be creating a situation by saying any truck where it's going to be, it could be a violation 6 hours out of the day. So it just creates some issues as far as the staff, I think.
I think my understanding is regarding the leasing business. Is that correct?
Well, I guess, I mean, and I don't know, Stephen, if you can speak to this, but I mean, I was trying to limit it to such that it would not vary from the intent of trying to limit that activity on the property, but still allow you the ability to function with that leasing operation. And so, you know, with that being said, I mean, I hear what Doug is saying, but I just think it's a slippery slope if we get into unlimited repairs on budget trucks, et cetera. You could end up with a lot more there than were intended. And, you know, I don't know, Steve. I mean, how do you solve? I mean, Stephen, practically, what do you think is the likelihood of having, you know, 3 or 4 there for repairs, and then 2 or 3 to be picked up?
Well, let me ask this in a different way, if you don't mind. Sure. Can you manage with 3 trucks at any one time, whether they're on site for repair or lease?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think that clarifies.
And that doesn't
All right, thank
that doesn't
you.
include anybody getting gas.
Yes. All right.
Right? Yeah.
Well, we're talking about on this lot, not necessarily at the fuel station.
Well, and
All
how
right.
do we word it so that if later he drops the budget and he picks up U-Haul?
All right. I think we need to stick to a clear definition. Thank you. All right. So I have a motion to approve with a limit of 3 trucks on this lot at any one time, to include a provision for a privacy fence or some green buffer of substantial size that creates the density and the visibility, the buffer that we're looking for. All right, any other comments? All right, I have a motion to approve with those conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we have 5 in support and 1 in opposition, correct? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, good luck to you, gentlemen. All right, we're on application 6494, 4763 regarding 401 Civic Center Drive. If we could have the applicant's rep come to the podium. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Michael Kartoski, Project 401 Civic Center Drive.
Okay, we're going to give these folks just a second to leave, so hold off on the timer until we get.
Thank you.
All right, now we can start. Your name and address again, sir?
Yeah, the project was 401 Civic Center Drive.
And we spent quite a bit of time on this application this last meeting, and we asked for some information so we could better understand the conditions in which the applicant needs to move forward. So if you will, and we have a summary of, we have a whole lot of documents up here, both site plans with the retaining wall and some things that have been changed, I think, to address some of the questions of the board. And then we had public comment. So with that, if you'll kind of give us a summary again of the conditions that now we have to consider.
Sure. I've got a brief statement. Do you mind if I would quickly run through it? Thank you. And thank you for having us back and for the questions we received in the letter of decision on February 13th. Like you said, we did provide a response with updated renderings, updated site plan, and the answers to all those questions that was sent on February 24th. Since then, we also submitted another option, on the board on the screen right now. So this was another one that we put together following the application on the 24th that we believe would address another one of those variances. Just a quick background on this project that we think is important context that was maybe missing during the previous meeting. This project started back in September 2021. This was based on the Army Corps solicitation that my company, FD Stonewater, responded to. We began negotiations with the city of Mobile on the ground lease for this parcel in question. That was on October of 2021. We went through multiple rounds of offers with the Army Corps of Engineers. We were indicated, or we were notified of a successful offer in April 2022. And that's when we immediately began ramping up discussions with the city and then also the Army Corps of Engineers to refine this, this site and this building. The first building site plan concept was shared with the city on June 1st of 2022. That's when we really started in earnest working with the city, with their designers for the master plan, which was Populous, and then also on the I-10 project that is with ALDOT on how that will impact this site. The city provided to us initial zoning standards for the special district, and that was in July of 2022, and then confirmed those standards in September of 2022. Since then, we went through the design review committee, the planning commission, multiple coordination meetings with the city and ALDOT on the master plan and the I-10 projects. And then we went through 2 rounds of the architectural review board, and then eventually received the certificate of appropriateness on November 7th. On November 17th, we were notified that this zoning would be switching from a special district, and then we received we were notified of the T52 designation at the end of that month. I believe that was, I don't have an exact date, end of November, I believe it was 29th maybe. And then 3 weeks later, we submitted the applications for the Consolidated Review Committee and then the Board of Adjustment process, and then got our meeting date of February 6th since then. So only saying that to illustrate it's been a very long process, complex process, trying to be as cooperative as possible as we can with all groups. We've been collaborative and made multiple revisions throughout this whole process. During last meeting, we were called federal government's minions. We're said to be threatening the city. What I just outlined, I hope, proves that is not correct. We've been working with both the city, with the board, to try to find solutions that work for both respecting our tenant, but also respecting the city of Mobile. And then since February 6th, we took the board's comments, we updated the site and the building, just a couple of quick changes that were made based on comments we received in that meeting. The loading dock entrance along Claiborne Street was shifted down to account for, there's a sign there that previously wasn't identified on survey. That's relocated southward towards Canal Street. And then the loading dock entrance was shrunk to 30 feet. In coordination with Army Corps, they are working to reduce the number of full-size trailers that would come down there so they can be screened at an alternate facility. So you would just have box trucks, normal delivery trucks coming to the loading dock and making that 30-foot width, which was the maximum allowable within the ordinance, work. We removed the terracing along the west side of the site, and this was the low walls that were in question last time, the screen walls that needed to be 4 feet. So we've revised those. There were a couple of different options that we sent. The last one that I mentioned, I think you all should have printouts up there that revised that wall, revise that wall to 4 feet and then also add brick facade to that wall. And then we also reworked that entrance plaza at the west side of the site. So based on those, I'll wrap this up quickly. Yep. Based on those changes that we made, 5 of the 11 previous variances can be, I guess, rescinded or no longer being sought, and we're left with 6 variances, and 1 being variance 11, which was on the cloth or fabric awnings, which really, I'm not saying it's an error, but I'm just not sure that's really applicable to our building. We've got the sunshades, which are integral to the building facade system. I wouldn't really say it's an awning, but we can discuss that. And we hope these efforts on our changes and the detailed responses we provided to the board show our desire to cooperate with the city, and its citizens, while also providing a high-quality product to the Army Corps of Engineers. And happy to answer any questions on either our responses, prior variances, or anything I just noted.
All right. Already, Mr. Golden, you have anything?
Couple questions. Well, the depiction with the concrete wall, is that, it looks like that's tapered down. Is that tapered down on both sides, or is it a solid 4-foot height wall all the way across?
Sorry, that is solid 4 foot all the way across. It turns back. The tapering happens further up to the future internal drive. You can see there are a couple arrows there. That's where it'll taper down, where you've got, far top left screen.
Is that due to elevation?
What's that?
Is that due to elevation?
No, that's just entry. The elevation, it's going to be, there's going to be some slope coming down from the building, but it's not a giant, 2-3 feet, I believe, is the max grading change from finished floor elevation of the lobby to edge of the street.
Okay. What's the minimum height of the wall at that point?
Minimum height up on in
Where
this
it tapers
internal
down.
drive? I believe that would go down to, I think the minimum is 18 inches. I can clarify that. Yeah.
For perspective. Okay.
Thanks.
Additional.
And yeah, two other things I just wanted to, I guess, clarify is, after our meeting last time, one of the things I was trying to figure out is why does the federal courthouse, which, high security risk, seems to kind of fit in with regards to, it seems like what's important is to kind of create that line along the streetscape so that people feel comfortable, it's walkability, et cetera. And so, the things I learned about that, one is I think that, the 50 feet, there are different ways you can calculate it. I mean, if the building's raised up, depending on height, the windows, et cetera. And that was one thing that they did to kind of, limit how far the building felt like it was set back or actually was set back. And then secondly, all of the landscaping that was done in between, kind of that hardscape fenced area and bollard area and then the building. It's hard to tell from the depiction on these pictures, but, do y'all have a plan to landscape that area in between so that it kind of doesn't create just this open space between the sidewalk, street, and the building?
Yeah, so we also, that's a great comment. We also, that came during the ARB, so that will be a landscaped area. We're limited on the height that we can do on the landscaping area because of the concealment security standards. So I believe the height, I don't want to give bad information, and we're also here with the Army Corps. They probably can speak more intelligently to that exact question, but there is a height limit on what we can do for shrubs, so you couldn't conceal a package or something to that effect. But short answer, yes, that will be landscaped.
But as far as, I guess, there are different levels of landscaping, but, when I just look at the federal courthouse, that to me is, a lot of native grasses and things like that. It will be something similar to that, or will it be, just some box
grasses,
hedges, or something?
Grasses should be completely fine. We would probably use that in low shrubs, so it's really just the height that we have to worry about.
Okay. Okay. And then, as far as the setback, when I look at this plan, it seems like it's well in excess of, well, I guess it's 50 feet, but it seems further back, especially on the west side and the north side. How was that calculated? Because it seems like, I don't know, for some reason visually when I look at this, it seems like it's way further set back than, say, what I looked at the federal courthouse.
So it's 50 feet from the and you can see we are tight as close as we possibly can get to the Canal Street and also Claiborne Street. We are right up against the property line with our fence because it's, and I believe our tenant will also speak to this shortly. We are as close as we can get to that, and it's that 50 feet, and it's to our controlled premises. So that is, property line is as close as we can get, unfortunately.
Okay, Mr. Milling, any other questions? Mr. Davis? Okay, any questions, Mr. Morris? Carol? Okay. I'll wait for the others to speak that you may have here in support. Okay, if you'll come to the podium, please. Good afternoon. Your name and address, sir.
Good afternoon. Colonel Jeremy Chapman, and I work at the Mobile headquarters, 109 St. Joseph Street.
Okay, have you looked through all the variance requests? You see a
Yes.
purpose for each one?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And I think that, the biggest one, you talked the 50-foot setback for new facilities. This is a Department of Defense standard regulation, whereas the courthouse or GSA or FBI, they have a little bit different standards, each agency within the government. But for Department of Defense, it is 50 foot from the secure perimeter. So it's 50 foot from the fence, and we've worked with FD Stonewater to push it all the way to the property line so that we're as close as can be. And I agree with the landscaping that it should be a walkable, beautiful landscape that fits in with the neighborhood and the neighboring businesses or whatever is put in this greater master plan here. It should all fit with that. The landscaping height is 18 inches, so he's correct. Low shrubs, flowers, native grasses, those kind of things. So it'll be landscaped, but that is the security requirement, especially for new facilities in the Department of Defense, especially because it's a standalone facility as well. There are no other secure perimeters around it like in a normal Army base. But it's really a beautiful facility. Right now we're off St. Joseph Street with about 800 employees. And our employees are mobile. I would say we bring tens of millions of dollars in revenue just in salaries. But the Mobile district serves the greater Alabama. We serve Mississippi. We serve Tennessee. We serve Georgia and all the way to the tip of Florida. And we also serve Latin America and South America. A lot of folks don't know that the Mobile U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we serve a huge worldwide network providing engineering solutions across the board, not just for military solutions, but for Brazil, we help them with their water infrastructure. So this is a group of professionals that is really second to none in the engineering realm when we're talking civil works. And so this is a very professional group. We're now in a building that's over 50 years old, in a GSA facility, and I would just say our employees deserve this beautiful facility, and we're looking forward to moving. Any questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think the main one being the setback. So there's a project in Buffalo, New York.
Your mic, please.
Sorry, that was not a new construction but a renovation.
Right.
It's in an urban environment, right on the sidewalk. And I guess how was this standard adapted for that project?
Right, so the Buffalo district moved into the historic downtown. It's a historic facility. It's a GSA building. It's also mixed use. So the first 2 floors is the Social Security Administration, and they occupy floor 3 through 5. And so the 50-foot standoff is already right there. Now they had to harden the elevators. They had to add more security staff. There were some other hardening measures for when you get to the 3rd floor. Buffalo district is a very small district, 250 employees total. The Mobile district has 1,250 employees, like I said, across this whole region and South America. So quite a bit of difference, but they're also grandfathered. So it's an existing facility, it's a GSA facility, and so they were grandfathered in, given those hardened measures, plus they start on the 2nd floor, so they're already away from that threat.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
One of the concerns that I've seen from the neighborhood, just in comments, was parking. And my office building is actually near the existing core building, and it just seems like over the years that, that there are core employees who would just park, on side streets and things like that as allowed, and throughout the day. What's the parking plan for this with regards? I know there's going to be a structured deck that's
Right.
built. But it sounds like that only a portion of the employees will have parking there, and then they'll be required, I guess, to go find other parking that they will pay for.
Right.
And I guess the intent of my question is, just trying to ensure there's not a situation where, there's a bunch of parking that is just done haphazardly within the side streets and neighborhoods and things that causes a problem, because that seems to be a concern. Could you speak to that?
Sure. And so we're going to have the same parking here in working with the city that we have in our current facility. We have a GSA parking garage there, and so roughly 150 vehicles from our facility are parked there, both government vehicles and some of our private employee vehicles, and the rest do find legal parking, either paid for parking lots, metered parking, wherever legal parking is available. Now, I agree it would be an issue if our employees started parking in a residential neighborhood, and that would just take one call to me, and that would end. That shouldn't happen. So they should be finding legal city, either street parking or metered lot parking that they would use. And the city may have other, they may have more available parking in that parking deck once it's complete. We haven't quite negotiated exactly what that is.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Two more. Good afternoon. Name and address, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. Jim DeLapp. I work here at 205 Government Street. Just real quick, and I serve as the Executive Director for Public Works for the City of Mobile, and we've worked very closely with the developer on behalf of the Corps of Engineers on this whole process over what's probably been over a year at this point. And I would just like to say, first of all, the developers worked in a very dynamic environment as the city has worked through zoning this previously unzoned property. We're here today, and they're here today, really because of the situation that they kind of fell into. And they're the first one out of the gates that's going into this site that is just recently zoned. And as was described, the developer started out on a process that had a previous planned zoning, and that changed in the final zoning, hence the reason, again, we're here today. And they worked since our last meeting here at the Board of Adjustments to reduce that from 11 to 6, which I think are very precise items that needed still the variance as best they could to get down to that. The other piece I wanted to say is because of the first ones out, and the zoning is less than probably ideal for the development, not just for this building, but really for the site. The city intends to still further develop the site, as you see in the graphic. I'm sure that those other developers, as they come in, are going to have similar types of challenges as they look to put in, whether it's a hotel or a mixed-use development or homes on the site that are going to probably be back here. So I think long-term, the city is, through the board needs to look at, is the zoning, proper? But it is what it is today. But long-term, we know that you may see other folks have to come down here in the future to be able to seek variances to the zoning as it is today. And so I just wanted to kind of make sure that that was clear. This isn't a one-off because it's the Army Corps or because it's this type of office building. I think the overall zoning for the site is going to produce challenges for other pieces going forward as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
When the council looked at this and it was zoning was defined, these specific items, my understanding, were left out, if that's the best way to describe it, or they were not provided. So
that's probably a good way. We in the original drafting of the zoning, we tried to accommodate not just the requirements we knew would be faced here, but we tried to look at a lot of different types of uses and make sure that it was going to be best suited for any future development. A lot of that got removed, which is unfortunate, and that's again why they're here today, and there'll probably be others in the future.
Right. Just trying to take that into consideration.
Appreciate it.
Any questions?
A couple.
Mr. Golden.
The new driveway that's drawn, that is where the primary entrance is. Is there some reason that wasn't a public street so that they wouldn't need the variance for the public entrance?
Go back to the previous.
It's still a publicly accessible street. It's the little turnoff there is really a drop off point so that vehicles can get out, do a drop off there, and then continue on around. If that answers the question.
Yeah, and I guess it could be one of their variance requests could be negated by I guess subdividing it in such fashion so that is a public street and not a private. I mean, if this as it's drawn here is private with easement, I guess.
It crosses. There's an easement that goes across there. The way the property line was originally delineated has it going through there. That's correct.
And then I guess to your point on the code, I mean that was developed in the council with neighborhood input and specifically excluded a lot of what's being asked here today. And so I guess my challenge is seeing a basis for the variance when the ink's hardly dry on the code, and that was ferreted out in the council, and so it didn't include these, and I struggle with that, and offer an answer there.
Yeah, I guess I would just say that there was a lot of input on both throughout the whole process, and it was changed rather in haste towards the end. So I would just leave it, and that's when a lot of the pieces that were thoughtfully put in there were removed, and that created the challenge that we're at today, and will be into the future, just for reference.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I think there's one more.
Thank you. All right. All right. Those in opposition, one at a time. Good afternoon.
Hello again. Ben Reynolds, 3908 St. Andrews Loop. I'm the District 4 representative on the Mobile City Council. I'd like to say thank you to the commander for coming down today. Their partnership with the City of Mobile is certainly historical and been beneficial, I think, to both of us. I said most of what I wanted to say last month, but I did want to just illustrate a couple of things and then start kind of from the beginning again. Again, it's not required for me or the board or the citizens of this city to prove anything here. The burden of proof that a variance is required falls squarely on the shoulders of the applicant, which in this case is FD Stonewater. The responses we got to the question, I don't think really changed much from last month to this one. We certainly see more wants, desires, wishes, but unfortunately they just don't align with the law that the city council passed. And to accept the setback as requested is to say that you accept that the site itself creates some hardship, some unique characteristic about the site, when I believe what's really going on is that these are self-imposed restrictions, self-imposed, self-inflicted by the applicant. There's nothing unique about the site. And then another point is that this board is sort of the backstop. The Corps came, or the city attracted, I don't know how that worked out, for them to come to this site. They made an attempt, the city, to structure a zoning code to accommodate the Corps before that was passed. So the Corps, of course, is trying to get their plan together to fit within that. And they went through all these steps before the law was ever created. And then, sure enough, the law was created, and now it puts them in somewhat of an adverse situation. But nonetheless, the law is what it is, and the ink's hardly dry on it. And the items that are being requested for variance were specifically removed. To the specific variance requests themselves, there was a lot of discussion about this setback on the south boundary. So, and in the response from the FD Stonewater, it says, according to Chapter 3-2.1, this 50-foot setback is required. So I went and looked, and I'll tell you, these regulations are tough to follow. There's a lot of them, too. But as I was looking, I did find this section in here in 3-2.1, minimum standoff, where it says the minimum standoff distance for new construction additions to existing buildings to the installation perimeter is 20 foot. It doesn't really apply here. It's not an existing building. But then it goes on to say about there must be a minimum aggregate standoff of 50 feet, but that also includes the clear zone. So what the heck's a clear zone? So I went to this diagram they have in this, and it shows that you can take into account a clear zone as part of your 50-foot. So I think to Jeremy's point earlier, he was discussing the GSA building, the courthouse, where it appears that the 50-foot or 25-foot on one of their side setbacks actually starts at the back of the curb, not at the property line. So I tried to figure out what clear zones were, and I found, a couple of documents about clear zones, and there was one specifically in here that says with regard to the RDG defines a clear zone as unobstructed traversable area provided beyond the edge of the traveled way for the recovery of errant vehicles. This clear zone includes the shoulder, curb, and gutter, bike lanes, and auxiliary lanes unless the auxiliary lane functions as a through lane. So although I don't think that they've produced enough here to grant the setback at all, but if this board entertained it, that 50-foot setback doesn't look like it should start where they have it depicted on the site plan, that it should certainly move out closer towards the road. And can the road be included as part of the 50-foot setback where it puts that building nearer to the curb, would be my question. But today I would say I'm advocating for you guys to send this back to the city council. If they haven't met the burden of meeting the requirements of a variance as is laid out in the law, then it really seems like some other sort of discussion needs to happen that goes beyond the purview of this board. Any questions from anyone?
Okay, any questions of the board?
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Next, please. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and hello again. My name is Sydney Betbys, 1210 Selma Street. I am here once again to do much like I did last time, to discuss the opportunity before us to create this transformative development in our historic downtown Mobile. The decisions made today, potentially, will be a 100-year plus decision on the way that this vital area is built out. So I appreciate the time that everyone is putting in to hear all of these comments. As you know, the DDD code was developed with citizen input to create a ground level pedestrian friendly urban experience that is unique to our downtown. It is unmatched in other areas of the city, and over the years has successfully created a thriving pedestrian friendly walkable downtown that has been achieved with intentional development through both public and private investment of dollars. This code is a contract between all residents, investors, and developers in downtown, and everyone knows and adheres to these same rules, and their personal investments are protected by those rules. May I ask that we all look at page 25 of the staff report in the revised detailed site plan, which I did also give y'all a hard copy of that. This also discusses, of course, variance number 1, which everybody seems to think is a huge issue, the setback requirement. And like Councilman Reynolds brought up, and like Mr. Milling has brought up, I mean, what is there to say? This is difficult in an urban core. What I do want to bring up is there is a person who is in charge of the building of the new federal courthouse and the renovation of the Campbell Courthouse, and she said, everything is negotiable. This person is a licensed civil engineer. She has had a career in the development business and in building and renovating federal court properties. Prior to coming to Mobile, this person was in charge of renovating a courthouse in Hawaii and is currently working with the Little Rock, Arkansas Federal District. I don't bring this up to bring this person into the discussion, but just to state a fact that we all knew, but this confirmation from this person who is experienced in this world of federal buildings is important in this, and this person also handles security on these types of buildings. These negotiations, of course, are evidenced right here in Mobile's new federal courthouse, which we have seen from other examples, and which I did bring up on those sheets that I gave you. Some of those attachments are photographs, aerial photographs showing the setbacks that have been allowed, which do not actually give a 50-foot setback from the edge of the building to the edge of their property line. If you look, the sidewalk and the curb, if you look at those sheets, to get the 50-foot on the east side, on the St. Joseph Street side, and on the south side, the St. Louis Street side, they actually use the sidewalk and the curb to get to the 50 feet. It uses the dedicated on-street parking to get to the 50-foot setback on the North or St. Anthony Street side. And it's only on the West or Conception Street side that it exceeds the 50-foot required setback. It also uses other design elements to mitigate the blast risk. And the Campbell Courthouse, which was recently renovated, uses ballistic glass and film in places to mitigate the fact that this actually is built within feet of the street because it's an historic building. Back to the setback request for the Stonewater Court, the variance request for the Stonewater building. On the Canal Street or the southerly side, if you take that facade of the building and you can see down to Canal Street, if you took in account all the way past that curb, say where the Sea of Canal is, you probably would gain at least 10 or 12 feet and hence be able to move the building closer to Canal Street, taking into account some of the mitigation effects that were brought into the federal courthouse. In doing so, you could, on the opposite side of the building, move that setback on the opposite side of the building and then also move the sidewalk closer. On the new driveway side, if you look at the property line, which I understand to be that dark dashed line on the outside of the new driveway, if you take the front facade of the building, I'm sorry, on the opposite side, the driveway side, if you take the facade of that building all the way to the edge of the outer new driveway, that looks clearly like about 100 feet. And essentially, the new driveway needs to be a street, which is called for in the master plan. That new driveway looks clearly like something in a suburban setting and not in a core downtown. So all of that should be a street, and then that could be lesser than this 100-foot setback, which they're showing here.
For the sake of time, I have to ask you.
Correct. Right. I'm sorry. I would say quickly on variance number 4, the dumpster enclosure material, brick and masonry are allowed, and those could certainly meet the code by that definition. I would certainly say, you know, we've got a chance here, of course, to not be any city USA, and let's do right by our code and do right by our citizens and come up with a correct plan that would do right by all of Mobile. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Thank you. I think we have time for another. Yeah, you get 4 total. Good afternoon. Name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is Heath Stevens.
You got to pull the mic up for you.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Heath Stevens. I live at 260 South Lawrence. So my house faces the Civic Center property. So I would just like to offer a couple of thoughts here. You know, some of the design elements of this building seem to have been chosen with either an intentional disregard or a complete lack of knowledge of the downtown form-based codes. This is unacceptable. You know, I very much want to see the Civic Center property developed, improved, see it contribute to the city, but we need a project that does that. These codes were put in place to achieve clear goals in the development of a vibrant, aka high tax base downtown. A vibrant downtown encourages business, residential infill, and tourism. It must be remembered that this location borders a residential area, Mobile Civic Center arena entertaining citizens and guests, and Mobile's cruise tourism gateway. Other design elements have supposedly been chosen based on the perceived threat from car bombings. If this threat is as high and legitimate as to warrant these design measures, this location is entirely unsuitable for such a purpose. It would be prudent to locate this building in a much less densely populated area where both design and space would allow for these routine detonations to occur with minimal collateral damage. I personally think that this perceived threat is overblown. I would also like to state regarding the parking structure that due to its size, its design is as important as the building itself. I know that this discussion today is about the building and not the parking structure specifically, but they are, of course, interlinked projects, and the design and variances that will be requested for that parking garage also need to be noted, because whatever gets approved for variance here will serve as a precedent for that parking garage and also for other structures within this development. I would also like to note that if you do a Google search for most of the other core buildings that are in downtown areas, I realize that many of these have been existing buildings and so forth, but these buildings often do not have these 50-foot setbacks. In fact, many of them are just buildings on a street with a sidewalk. They'll have some bollards out there on the sidewalk, and that has been deemed sufficient for these buildings. In fact, of course, the current location for the core building downtown is just a downtown building right next to the sidewalk with none of these protections, and none of them have been needed. If we do look at reducing the site setbacks, including, as we discussed, taking into account the sidewalks and such, it will actually reduce the required land lease for the building. The city could even use more of that land than for other development purposes. So in essence, the city gets a little something out of this if they do follow the form-based codes. The representative from the Corps mentioned that this is not built on an Army base, and that is true. We're not trying to build another fort downtown. We already have Fort Condé. We don't need Fort Corps of Engineers as well. I would love to see a building that's speaks to Mobile and looks like it belongs in downtown Mobile. Mr. DeLapp mentioned here that the current form-based codes, the downtown development district codes, were the result of a lot of input from a lot of people, and he more or less said that he would like to ignore them for this building and for the future development of the Civic Center property, which I think is not the right course of action. In closing, I just wanted to say what we build today will contribute or detract from downtown for decades to come. The downtown development district is designed to create a walkable urban environment, and we'll never get there if we allow these variances for such premier developments. It will set the precedent for other developers to say, well, we did that over here, can I have my variance too? And that is something that we want to put a stop to.
Any questions? Thanks, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is James Backus. I live at 509 Eslava Street, about a block from this development. Rather than focus on the setback and the particular of the 6 variance requests that are before you, I'd like to focus on the variance that they have not submitted because they are within the downtown development district. They're silent on the fact that they are not providing any off-street parking as part of this application. And the reason is that they are in the downtown development district. And we've heard Mr. DeLapp say that the downtown development district code is probably not applicable to this site. If you grant these 6 variances, I think you will probably be agreeing with him that you're avoiding the downtown development district as it applies to this site. And so I asked you, and I did write this, hopefully you had a chance to review it. My point is this, that if you accept their position on this, then you should then apply the parking requirements that would apply to a building of this type that would be built anywhere else in the city of Mobile. There's a 6-story office building on Montlamar Drive. It has 1 parking space for every 300 square feet. This is a 200,000 square foot office building, which would then require 650 parking spaces. We thank you, Colonel, for assuring us that we're going to get 150 thereabouts, or 130. The number keeps going up. In a meeting in November, I think it was maybe 40. I forget exactly what we heard last month. It was maybe 50 or something like that. We believe in our neighborhood that the intent of the zoning ordinance is to protect adjacent property owners, particularly in this residential area, from the intrusion of a lot of traffic and on-street parking. And that's why that provision, if this was built anywhere else, is, I think it's paragraph, let me see if I can find it. It's 64.6, paragraph A2. And I'm sure y'all are familiar with that, so I'm not. So essentially, that's our feeling. We want to make sure that we want to be good neighbors to the Corps. As I said last week, we don't have any objection. We love the Corps. I served in the Corps, so we have no objection to that. But if we essentially are given a suburban type environment here that flies in the face of the Downtown Development District Code, then I think we ought to apply all the rules, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to, by agreement, and what the code says is that there has to be a special arrangement, a special agreement. As far as I know, that agreement has not been reached between the Corps, the developer, and the city with respect to the parking structure. I don't know that you've seen the parking structure as it hasn't been submitted to you. So my feeling and the feeling of our neighbors is that you have a right and a duty to review that agreement to make sure that the agreement, the special agreement between the Corps, the developer, and the city with respect to the parking structure provides adequate off-street parking so that we can have the enjoyment of our neighborhood as it was before. Just as we would expect you to defend every citizen in any neighborhood in this city. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. No, I got to go to the applicant for a rebuttal at this point. Now, he can confer with you beforehand if you want to have that conversation.
Right, just a couple of quick clarifications or rebuttals here. On the finishes for the enclosure material, the allowable materials are wood shingles, cementitious clapboards, like a vinyl siding almost, stucco, board and batten. This came up on the Architectural Review Board. We certainly talked them through it. That's why we included the cut sections of the metal panel that we're proposing that would have better resistance to weathering in this environment, a better impact rating than any of those. So that explains kind of what did come up in the ARB, which is why it was adjusted to be that metal panel. And then let's see what else was there. A new driveway. So that's part of that parcel is on the west side. That new driveway, I think Jim mentioned this as well, but that is actually going to be part of that is excluded from the premises because it's going to serve as a street for the future Civic Center site. So our property line is currently shown there. It's going to be actually excluded out so that the city or the future developers will have full use of that road. That's not going to be our road.
Is that what you were going to clarify? I'll let you assist. Yeah, if you'll assist him.
Again, Jim DeLab, because the parking's not a part of although the arrangement for the lease has a number of spaces, they're not building the parking deck. The parking deck is currently under design, approved by the city council. It's 1,025 parking spaces, so it can more than accommodate the number that was previously described, which was, I think, 1 per 300 square feet. So I think it's at 600 plus, and the Corps has effectively purchased 151 spots. So they've reserved 151 spots as a part of the lease that they have going forward. But their employees can purchase as many more as they want. So there's no limit to that. And so there's plenty of parking available on site, and that parking deck is probably within 75 feet of their location. So again, just to refute the notion that there's not a parking on site, the whole purpose of the city was to make sure that we first replace the parking for the surface parking on the Civic Center site, which is what we're doing, a large investment by the city to allow not only this building to go in with its corporate headquarters, but to allow for other visitors on the site or folks that frequent the site.
Do you have questions of the board?
I do. Yes, Chairman. Mr. Lapp, so right now, so there's 1,025 or so, of which 150 will be contracted by the Corps. And then the Corps employees, the additional ones, would have the ability to lease at what rate? Do you know that yet?
I don't know the rate right now. It'll be determined because we have a third party that runs our parking structure. I'm sure because of the fact that they're a tenant there may be a negotiated rate with them for the individuals, for the employees.
And I guess my question is because, again, where I'm located, there are parking lots all around the core building that provide parking at anywhere from the time I've been there, $35 to say $55 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the core employees choose not to pay that and to just try to find free on-street parking. And, you know, I've seen them move their cars every 2 hours and things like that. And so that's my concern is that, you know, you've got an extra 500 people. If they choose not to use the structured deck, which I'm in the real estate development business,
Sure.
my sense is it's going to be probably the most expensive downtown with construction costs unless there's some kind of negotiated deal. Where do they park, you know, outside of that? Because, you know, like where we are, you have surrounding parking lots.
Sure.
Here, you know, I don't know where other alternatives are that are close by that, you know, employees could walk. And so that's my concern. How is that going to be taken care of for the additional 500 if they choose not to pay for parking?
And I agree with what the commander said. I mean, the core employees are going to find legal parking spots to park their vehicles. If they're illegal, they'll probably get towed or ticketed. Just like this building, employees in this building, not all park in the county parking garage. Many park in lots around here. Some park underneath the bridge. Some park, in other lots and walk and opt to walk a couple blocks. So there's alternatives if they decide not to park there. This parking deck here, the county parking deck, the top floor of that and typically the floor below that are almost always empty. They could park there if they wanted to, if it's a cheaper rate. I venture to say that the rate that's probably negotiated with employees will probably be very competitive for them to use, and many would probably opt to use that, if not the majority of them.
Any additional questions?
Yeah. At this time, legal parking would be street front in Church Street East, correct? I mean, Church Street East is not restricted. I mean, it's a public street. You can park there, correct?
If it's legal, I
mean,
suppose.
legal. I mean, yeah, not in front of a fire hydrant, but you can park there. That's
I
closer than
suppose,
any other alternative.
Yeah, I suppose anyone going to the Civic Center today could do the same thing, going to park it, coming to an event or whatever. So wherever the legal parking is an option for anyone.
Okay. Are there time constraints? Are there time constraints on that parking? You know, like around my office, there are 2-hour limits. Instead, are there time constraints? So somebody could park there all day long currently?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know for sure. And that's something that can be looked at by the city. I mean, you know, the traffic engineering department also falls under our purview. That's something that we can obviously look at to try and, you know, work with the citizens in that area to make sure that, you know, we don't create a problem. That's not the intent. But the development of this site, which sounds like everyone's very much in favor of, not just with having an office, a corporate headquarters there with up to 800 employees, but having a better use than just a big open, you know, parking lot, will draw more people. So I don't think it's probably going to be only this issue, and that's why I came up earlier to speak and said, they're the first ones in the chute with this first building, but you're going to have a structured parking. You're going to have other development on that site that's going to draw more people. And the purpose of the city investing in that parking deck is to make sure we minimize that impact to the community. So that's a $30 million investment we're putting in to build that parking deck just for that purpose, is to minimize the impact so that there's places for people to park, to include these employees.
Any other questions? All right. Sir.
How you doing?
We're kind of sharing time here between the three of you.
I appreciate, Colonel Jeremy Chapman. I just want to clarify on the security piece, and I appreciate Councilman Reynolds and the constituents coming in here. I mean, Mobile District is Mobile. I appreciate everything that they say. You know, our idea of a perfect site is to fit into the beautiful walking landscape of this area. But as far as the setback, it's 50 feet from the secure perimeter. His discussion about clear zone just talks about fields of fire, fields of view, you know, folks sneaking up on us. It includes the curb, it includes the street. Any unencumbered site views is what clear zone is talking about. When we're talking about the secure perimeter, that is the fence. So we can only push that, you know, to the property line, and then the building must be 50-foot setback. The courthouse is Department of Justice, and again, GSA follows different rules. Department of Justice follows different rules. Department of Homeland Security, the FBI has a 100-foot setback, so they're different. The Department of Defense is very clear. This is a requirement. It's not a need. It's not a want. You know, I will not request a variance up to the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, for a new construction building. It's just not going to happen. If that were to be, you know, to denied and we have to move to a different site, then we'll have to move to a different site. But this is not going to change the setback requirement in law.
Okay, question for you.
Yeah.
Current building, was any hardening done?
The current GSA facility that we're in? Yeah. There is hardening. There also, we don't have many offices on the first floor. It's mostly conference space. There's a big security area. There's a very large foyer area before you even get to the elevators if you've been to our facility. And most of the first floor.
So there has been a mitigation.
Right. There is some mitigation there for security, but it does not meet the current requirements. I mean, it is a 50-year-old plus facility.
Okay. Any other questions?
Was a risk assessment completed on this project?
For this process, yes. Our security folks have been in communication all the way up to our headquarters in Washington, D.C. on this for years. We've been working on this for much longer than FD Stonewater talked about. We've been talking about this project for years because we do need a new facility for our employees.
Okay. Is that available for review?
I will have to get back to you on that as far as the risk analysis available for public comment. I don't think that it is for security reasons, but I will get back to you on that.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that concludes our public hearing on this application. Staff have anything to add that we haven't already hammered? Okay. Okay, I have a request from the staff for a 5-minute break to give those that. Okay. Okay. Sure. All right. The applicant has eliminated through, I think, discussion with staff and a review of the variances, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the variance request. So we'll start with the first one, which is the 50-foot setback. And that is from Canal and Claiborne, and complying with the required primary frontage setback of 5 feet and secondary 12, which I spent hours trying to review security requirements for level 3. That's my understanding. This is being built to a level 3 standard. And there's obviously various ways you can mitigate it, as we were told. So 50-foot setback is one of those options. The primary entrance facing the garage, the security protocol does state having the front entrance so that you could funnel through a primary, if my understanding is correct. That's the reason why it's facing the garage, because that's where you anticipate most of your activity. 3 has already been withdrawn. 4, dumpster enclosure, and I kind of went back and forth with staff on this one a little bit myself. Metal screening, because metal fencing is allowed, correct?
A metal material, but I think the intent is for metal picket that looks like wrought iron, not a metal screen.
Okay. Well, my understanding of wrought iron is metal, so it's a terminology, I guess. 5 would be the concrete exterior finish and metal exterior finishes. We really haven't heard much about that today. Transparency requirement for ground floor using long frontages to be 30%. The applicants, it appears, with 21.6. Is that still the case?
That is correct, and that's just for the service area only.
Which would be the, Claiborne side?
Yes.
Okay. And then 10 has been withdrawn. And then the last, which is the common entry frontage awnings with fabric versus a metal fin or some other type design. Okay, with that, any questions once again of the board? Any clarification requirements? All right. I would ask if anyone should make a motion to approve or to deny, that they specify each one of these individually so that we'll be clear for the record. Yes.
What I would suggest is that you refer to page 15 in your staff report and then just call out the number and the request when making the motion.
Okay.
I said, are we going to take them one by one?
Let's do that for the record. It'll make it easier for the minutes. All right, so variance request 1, which is the 50-foot setback. Chair entertain a motion regarding that variance request.
I'll make a motion to deny it because I don't see a site specific.
Okay, I have a motion to deny and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Okay, I was in support, so I'll oppose. So that means that, yeah. All right, those in favor of the motion to deny, raise your hand, please. Okay, 3. Those in support of the variance, which would be opposed to the motion, come on. How many? All right. So the variance request for the 50-foot's been denied. Lack of 5. Okay. Variance 2, which is the primary entrance fronting Canal or Claiborne Street. Chair entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, with 2, so that one fails as well for a lack of 5.
Yes, just to clarify for those that are listening, the Board of Adjustment rules require
Requires 5 to affirm the
affirmative votes to approve.
Okay. We are on the variance number 4, the dumpster enclosure material. And Chair will make a motion to approve. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, we got 3 for and 3 opposed.
Can I make a follow-up motion on that, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would make a motion that we deny the dumpster enclosure, but allow the screening material on the rooftop equipment. Because I think the DDD code really speaks to the visual walking sight line, not, things that are above that line, which I think would be the rooftop
Okay.
equipment.
So let's revisit that one. Chair entertain a motion, and we're back to 4 again. And he's asking to revisit that variance request with a
Split, that they are not allowed for the metal panels on the dumpster enclosure area, but they are for the equipment on the roof.
Okay. All right, so a motion to approve over the cover per se, correct? Right. Not the side panels. Correct. All right, all those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we have 1 opposed. That motion carries. Application 5, or variance 5, variance required for exterior finishes as concrete, metal, or unapproved exterior finishes. This includes metal screening for rooftop HVAC. Chair entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second. I have a motion to approve to second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Is that unanimous? Okay. Let's see, we can skip 6 and 7. We can skip 8. Number 9, additional transparency requirement for ground floor commercial uses along frontage. This is the back of the house as we describe it.
Yes, it is only where the truck dock and the service area will be. So it's just this little area that is not in compliance.
All right. Chair makes a motion to approve the variance request for that. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Number 11. common entry frontage awnings required for metal fins, sunshades as only fabric awnings. I want to get clarification. Are we talking about an actual awning or are we talking about sunshades?
Mr. Chair, I would ask the staff, is that addressed in the code? I mean, I think the code is silent on that, and this might be unnecessary.
Well, the code allows for this frontage type a fabric awning only. It doesn't provide any other for this frontage type.
But I don't think this is an awning any more than a shutter is an awning.
Well, it's an undefined shading structure.
Okay. All right. So we're back to 11. Common entry frontage awnings, window covering, variance required for metal fins, sunshine only as only fabric awnings are allowed, window shading vices in this frontage type. Chair, entertain a motion for the variance request.
I motion that be approved.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that one was approved as well. Let's go back to one more time because I want to make sure I'm clear on this. And Mr. Golden, I think you were the one who made the motion initially to deny the 50-foot. Is it from the property line or from the street? Curb? Does it matter?
I think it should be in compliance. So I don't think it matters.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Yes.
On that? You know, I guess I would maybe, or I think differently than say Mr. Reynolds and what he said. I do think there's a hardship in the sense that I do think it's important to have entities like the Corps of Engineers downtown, and I think it's very difficult to find sites, number one, for projects of this size downtown, and so I do think that it requires a compromise to try to come up with something that, you know, you can't write a code that fits every single building. I was involved in the process of the DDD code, and we made mistakes at certain times and went back and tried to correct those. And so I think the value of having the core downtown is important if we can make it work without causing hardship to the surrounding neighbors. And so my opinion on the 50-foot setback is, you know, taking the colonel at his word that, you know, this is a different set of requirements than, say, the federal courthouse, then what I felt like is that you could mitigate that by doing other things to create those hard lines that bring that building visually up towards the street with the landscaping and that commitment to do that, you know, similar to what the courthouse has done. And so, in my opinion, I think that there could be a compromise made to protect the setbacks that they need, but also incorporating items that would hopefully, you know, not create an island setback 50 feet from the street. So that was my position.
Okay, and I didn't see any variance in here where we had to address parking.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, on-street parking, whether it was approved or not. All right. Any other activity associated with this particular application? That concludes. All right, we'll take a 5-minute rest, recess. I don't know. I mean, what time it is? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, no. Thank you. Hang around. Wait. Never.
Yes, and I believe the applicant is looking to withdraw both this one and, in the interest of time, number 6 as well.
That's correct. Oh, it's okay. Thank you.
Correct.
Good afternoon. My name is David Lane Beard, representing. Excuse me. My name is David Lane Beard. I'm a engineer representing Big Tuna Car Wash Express, 105 Commercial Parkway, West Monroe, Louisiana. Well, what we would like, and the reason we asked for this variance is, and I supplied y'all with, photographs up and down the street. This is a substantial investment. It may be, there's, sometimes people think, oh, this is a car wash, is a little stigma. This is an express car wash tunnel. He has one already established on South Schillinger Road. These car washes, $3 million plus investments. He wants it to look nice. He wants to comply, but he also wants to provide a safe environment for the customers and employees. With the number of trees we're not disagreeing that it needs to be landscaped, because that's part of the experience of going to one of these washes, is to be nice, neat, well kept. They're staffed full time during operating hours. But what we would like, what the owner's requesting, is that instead of a tree every 30 foot, it breaks up the sight lines. Some ladies, or not just ladies, but people in general, like to be able to see their surroundings as they're doing whatever. And it will be, what we're requesting is just to reduce the number of trees instead of every 30 foot, and you're not being able to see through, and to give that person a secure feeling. That's what we're trying to, what we're asking for, is that we're not against the landscaping, and we want to have a nice facility there on the site. But just to be, yeah.
Bert's also going to bring
I have
you
a hard copy I can give you.
Is going to bring you a hard copy. But as you see on the staff report on page 3,
I mean, he's engaged a landscape architect to make sure that it's a nice site. Sir? Palm tree?
Oh, Carl, this is yours? Is this part of this package?
That was the package he proposed. So he is proposing, I think, 8 of the tall palm trees, and then none of the other plant materials shown on the landscape plan meet any of our landscaping criteria for overstory or understory trees.
That was my question.
No, sir. No.
So Mr.
I mean, the tree planting.
It's just for the tree plantings. Because they have 3 street frontages, they're supposed to have 5 trees along the Spring Hill Avenue frontage, 11 on Burton, which is the east side, and then 9 on Hosfeld, which is the west side. They only are proposing 2 of the palm trees to be within the front setback along Spring Hill Avenue. None of the other proposed trees would be within any of the required frontage area.
Yes, sir. Fence as required. Seven, is that correct? 7 o'clock, closing. 8 o'clock. There is a cross street. We, realizing the traffic patterns that these facilities generate, the access to the lot is along the north property line. Okay, and then you come to the front and wrap around the front and then exit out the back. Oh, there's parking back there.
Well, there's nothing that generates a required parking amount except for, I think, the office that might be associated with the car wash facility.
Back property line. Yeah, along the fence line in the back where we got the parallel parking.
What type of landscaping would you,
Just to clarify, landscaping's not the issue. Green space. Right. Yeah, rather than along the frontages.
on the north, on the other side of the fence there, the neighbor has a couple of Connex boxes, I believe, he uses for rental property. Something to buffer that.
Just have one. I've noticed the one which they on Otter Tail or something. Your car wash station that you have out west? Yeah. Well, I was wondering, since you didn't want the trees, whether there was a certain kind of, I say, image of your business that you wanted projected. That's why you kind of told.
We have a tuna fish. Yeah, part of the theme and all. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the brand.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
And, you know, well, you know, we're like any other business, in the time is money and time is clicking, and we've waited 45 days. Oh,
Well, Mr. Chairman, just from my perspective, needing 36 and having 9, that's, I would rather you take another run at it than deny it, and then you have to be in full compliance. That's just, well, that's, I mean, are you familiar with the code? I mean,
yes,
okay.
that's right. Very, very much so. That's why we're here.
Yeah. I mean, we operate under hardships, and there's exhibited, I haven't seen a hardship. I mean, I would just recommend, from my position, to make another effort at drawing it to comply.
So what can we do today while we're here as far as increasing some of the trees, keeping in mind the view corridor for safety and other factors like that?
Well,
Variances are site plan specific. So whatever the board approves, it either has to be reflected on this plan or they have to stipulate it in their conditions of approval, like you heard on prior applications. So you're getting some feedback from the board. You can wait 30 days. In the next 2 weeks prior to the board's next meeting, getting them a revised plan that you're proposing that takes into account the considerations they're telling you to take into account.
And let me also add to that, that the trees every 30 feet, that's not required. The 30-foot comes into how we determine how many trees are required. They do not have to be spaced every 30 feet. They can be grouped. For example, palm trees can be grouped more closely together than, for example, live oak trees. So you could potentially have clusters of palm trees that still retain sight lines and security that you're trying to maintain, while still perhaps getting a little bit higher number of plant material trees that would meet the intent of the ordinance and help the community.
Well, let's, I guess. Is there a certain number of trees?
Well, it's really more options on what type of trees you plant. Again, you said you'd engage the services of a landscape architect. They need to look at our tree list, what qualifies as understory and overstory, and take that into account. And as Mr. Hoffman was saying, you know, looking at clustering, putting some along the rear property line, you know, there are options. And if you cannot fit the prescribed number of trees, 28 overstory, 6 perimeter trees, which is half and half, understory, overstory, and then 2 parking trees. What is the hardship associated with the property that keeps you from meeting those ratios? That's what the board's looking for.
I move that we hold over 30 days.
That is correct. Number 6 is withdrawn. That's correct, and you have some correspondence in support of this application as well.
Yes, sir. My name is Brent Greenwald. I'm the homeowner at 28 Edgefield Road. Yes. Yes.
Motion that we approve. Subject to staff recommendation.
Second. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hannah Bowling, or Johanna Bowling. We own 171 Fenwick Road. Correct. Correct. So our, I guess, hardship is in the sense is that we bought this house from my husband's grandfather and redid it. A year and a half later, we moved in. And in that time, we have acquired a third boat. However, we also did not take in consideration, we needed a larger, I know that sounds silly, but we needed a larger boat shed from what, if you look at the porch, our biggest issue is if we don't get the 4-foot variance, then we are literally on top of our outdoor porch area. You can see there. So without it, you know, it kind of takes away from, well, first of all, we just don't want a structure on top of a structure. But this will accommodate, you know, the boats we have or future boats that, I hate to say, you know, I sound silly, but that we might acquire, versus building something that's not going to accommodate us for the future. So our hardship is just, I guess, you know, with the boat, leaving it exposed, you're not only depreciating the value of it, even if you cover it, you know, with the boat cover, there's still a trailer and tires and things like that that tend to get sun damage and things like that. Oh, you're good. We have the boat, yes. It's in a driveway in the front of the house. And the one comment, as was sent out previous to this meeting that was given to y'all from a neighbor, was they would rather, you know, they want this to be considered because they don't want the boat in the front yard. you know, as our current parking spot for it.
One thing that may help you, I noticed, is you have the site plans rotated erroneously. Fenwick Drive shown on your site plan
Is on the front.
Is here. Yeah. It's actually, you know, you need to just turn it 45 degrees. The pool
has
no
been filled
longer
in.
there.
Correct. And now the porch is where the pool resided. It's an open, you know, it doesn't have walls. It's just an open porch with a fireplace at the end. So, you know, we are going to be looking at a structure to our left, but we would rather it not be on the structure if we can have it that way.
Question for Steph. Have we, okay, good.
Show me the point. Show me the outline where they need the variance.
Back. Mm-hmm. Correct. The back is to keep the 8-foot, you know, standard variance. Just we need it on the side. Yeah.
And this is more for staff.
Okay.
Have we done, or and you may be familiar with any other structures in the neighborhood that sit within the setback, but I guess the question of staff is, are you aware of any other variances allowed in the neighborhood? I didn't see any in the report.
We didn't look at the whole neighborhood, but to be honest with you, I can't recall any recently.
I can remember one, but I can't remember if it was in this necessarily. It was for something similar.
It's in land fair, if that, I don't know. Yes. We do. We have an HOA. No. 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 Correct. Yes, I agree. We do not. We just, you know, through this process, we've had, you know, most people had said they'd rather it be in the backyard than in the front yard, which I don't blame them. But we are trying to, you know, figure that out before we can work on, you know, we don't want to pour concrete and things like that if this is not going to be a feasible task for us to take on. No. We're hitting the patio. Existing patio. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Yes, 18. Okay. Okay. We have the one on the side. Right. So they have a driveway in between and then a carport before the house starts. I'm not sure the exact dimensions. But we share a brick wall as of right now.
The one in support.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Oh, a boat shed. Open. And then on the back, well, the back end would have, I think there's a photo that I've submitted.
It might be in the folder behind you.
That part was more my husband as far as the aesthetic of it. I can't remember. Well, okay, so he put, I don't know if you need this copy, but he did, make it so that it did close, so that it is enclosed. Sorry, yes. So he is planning, we painted the home white. He's planning to use, metal siding and then paint it white and give it a black roof to match the home that we have since painted and got a new roof on. I have it right here if you end up needing it. Okay. I think it's ours. Honestly, I honestly don't know. Yes, it is. I'm sorry. Yes. Mm-hmm. That would be part of the enclosed, and that would be more of a shed, for tools and things like that, which adheres to the 8 on the back and obviously 8 on its side. To adhere to the 8 foot. Is that what you're talking about? Oh, the building. Yes. I'm sorry. The structure. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes.
Move that we approve.
The one thing I want to point out is this site plan was hand drawn, which is nothing wrong with that, but we're concerned about scale and whether or not it's 4 feet or 3 feet off that side property line. So if the board's going to consider this for approval, it can only be for 4 feet because that was what was advertised. Now, the other thing that we found is it may exceed site coverage. It's the boat shelter is at 720 square feet, and then the storage room is 240 square feet. And based on the calculations, that would put them at 37.3% site coverage. We did not find that until after legal ads were running, and so we couldn't include it in the application. So they're allowed 35. So they can scale the bill. If the board approves this today, it would be at 4 feet, and it would not allow the site coverage to exceed 35 feet. So they can scale the building down, whatever part. But I want to bring that to the board's attention.
I still approve with the 4 feet. Downspots.
You have 3 more.
Vince Lacoste with Bethel Engineering, 3233 Executive Park Circle. Yes, we're agreeable. No. Oh, I thought you were asking me if I had questions for them. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm sure they don't.
So moved, Mr. Chair. Subject to staff recommendations.
Second. Aye.
Yes, also agreeable.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Aye.
Yes, and I believe the applicant is going to request to withdraw. Okay. I sit corrected.
Mitchell Peters, I'm with Zito Russell Architects, 820 South University Boulevard, Suite 2G, 36609. Well, I have a question. I spoke with Mr. Hoffman last week, and we had entered this application with the knowledge that the new ordinance was going to be in effect prior to this meeting. So what we're asking for was a parking and use variance. But after speaking with Mr. Hoffman and reviewing the staff report, he's telling me that since we submitted it prior to the ordinance going into effect, that we have to either have the plan reviewed for the previous ordinance or withdraw and resubmit.
The UDC went into effect last week on March 1st. However, in the UDC, I think it's Article 6, it specifically states applications submitted prior to the effective date will be considered under the prior regulations. So their permits and so forth were submitted prior to March 1, so they can't just automatically change gears. The only way they can do that is to pull those plans under review and resubmit now.
Well, I think the use variance would still be required, I believe, but the parking ratio variance would not be required. I think that's one reason why they wanted to use the UDC parking requirements is because they have essentially been reduced citywide, and that benefits the site in
Can we approve the use and deny the parking, and then it's compliant?
That is correct. You can review the use today. The parking aspect of it, the only thing I get concerned, this is week one of the UDC, and yes, and there have you have granted parking variances, or at least a parking variance to this site. As I recall, there were issues with the conditions placed on that approval.
There have been multiple issues in that any required parking that they were to provide had to be paved and not with aggregate. The right-of-way is still perhaps being used for circulation to get to the paved parking on the site. But because they keep adding uses which keep increasing the parking requirements is why they have to keep coming back to address use and parking issues.
The problem is they have plans in, and they're tied to the old zoning ordinance because of when those plans were submitted in terms of parking ratio, or parking period, ratio, surface, etc.
The last variance that we asked for was for the Lower Alabama Volleyball Club. The space that we're asking for today for the use variance is listed on that site plan as the use that we have today as a sports club. All the parking that was on that site plan was in accordance with the old ordinance. But we did have parking in the right of way. In the meantime, we did submit another plan to Ms. York. Unfortunately, is not here, and work with her to get that approved. And what my understanding was, now you can tell me wrong, so we're going to get an administrative approval that wouldn't have to require us to come back before the variance board. That's, she was working with Matt White at White's Runner on that issue.
No. I would say this, the UDC doesn't stipulate as big of a parking ratio as the previous ordinance did. Now, as I recall, a lot of the issue with some of the previous, or the most recent was recent approval, is the location of parking and or maneuvering area in the right-of-way. And that, to continue, would require a right-of-way use agreement, and I believe, and part of the issue with that was it was aggregate and it didn't get approved.
I believe that's correct. So this application, they're proposing to put in new paved parking for this suite. The handicap accessible spaces have to be paved in order to meet federal law. And as Margaret has said, they've already applied for building permits, which they did that prior to the adoption of the new zoning ordinance. Therefore, they're tied to the old zoning regulations.
Go back to the previous plan, you'll see the shaded area up there on the top right. That is new concrete. So those parking spaces will be paved. The gravel is there for circulation. However, if it has to be paved, then it has to be paved. The other parking on the north side is on two pads that is the existing concrete pavement. And as was directed from the exclude all the parking from the right of way.
You can consider both today. That is not what staff's recommended, but you can consider the use variance today, and you can also consider the parking variance. The parking variance is based on the zoning ordinance standards that were in effect at the time of permitting or at the time of permit application.
If that's the case, then the site does not park. It does not have enough parking space.
I misspoke. You only have before you today a use variance. The parking variance is either needed or, as has been discussed, their permit applications need to be withdrawn and resubmitted, and then they can comply with the UDC. I apologize. I have confused this terribly.
It sounds like they're the victim of progress.
Timing is important. That's not something the board has to act on. That's a decision they make in terms of their permitting documents. The only thing you have before you today is use. Parking was not advertised. It's simply a factor related to the application.
But so we're back to their plans that they've submitted. So do they have to pull those and resubmit? So that doesn't really follow our calendar. That doesn't follow BZA calendar.
They can either, for their building permits, they can either withdraw those plans and submit new plans for building permits under the Unified Development Code parking ratio, or they can apply for a parking ratio variance for the next meeting, and that may be under consideration under the old zoning ordinance, and that may be the less expensive route for the applicant as well than having to reapply for building permits.
We have not submitted for construction plans. That has not been, we just submitted to you guys. So we have not submitted for city plan review at this time. We wanted to get through this and then go.
Probably would be a B3. So now about half of the warehouse building is in a B3 use, and the other half is still in a warehouse use.
Motion to approve, subject to all of staff's recommendations. Based on everything Margaret said. The use. Aye.
We'll work with